So I've seen some people asking about this lately, and I think the simple question is how hard is it to win a slip and fall case? So first, let me talk to you generally what a slip and fall case is, sometimes called a trip and fall. Premises liability is often another term that generally kind of aligns, but a slip and fall, right, is you trip on a pothole or some water or a stair or kind of a hazard that a number of things, right? You slip on something or trip on something causing a fall. And so how hard are these cases to win? What I can say first off, initially off the bat, it's harder to win than an auto accident, right? So in an auto accident, you are going to be in a position where there's a police report, the other driver's there might be camera footage, there's going to be witnesses. There's a lot more liability can be clearer in an auto accident. So that's the threshold, right? A lot of people who do what I do personal injury, will do car accidents, they do slip and falls. And so in the context of those, slip and falls can be harder because of that. Frankly, a lot of the time, unlike an auto accident, a slip and fall case is generally not going to be settled pre-suit. It's often going to require litigation. Let me talk about that a little bit before you get worried that they have to go to court and what that means. So the first thing is, if you are in the middle of a slip and fall, and let's say you go to a store and there's a puddle that you don't see, and you trip, you hurt your neck, you fall, period, right? Or something falls on you. One of the things you definitely need to do is make sure in some way, shape, or form to report it to the facility you're at. Say you're at some big box store buying something, you slip on report to a manager, report to employee. I mean, frankly, if you can't find anybody and you need to go to the hospital, usually calling an ambulance helps. But if you're in there and you got to turn your camera on and say, here I am at Target, here's the spill, whatever that may be, get some kind of record. Because the challenge is they're not going to generally preserve footage of that for more than 30 days. And so it's going to be hard to know what the scope of your injuries are at that point. So that's like another thing that makes these cases harder is it can be hard to preserve it. Like I said, if you walk out of there pretty hurt and you leave, you don't tell anybody, that's called often what's called a blind claim. And what that can put you in the position of is it's going to be hard. It's going to be he said, she said. There's not going to have any video footage, and unless you can prove you're there in some way, shape, or form, you're kind of stuck. So that's why one of the first things to do is to do that. Like I said, if an ambulance gets called, there will be some kind of record, but frankly, not too many of my cases involve that. Somebody gets hurt, your pride's probably pretty hurt, right? Falling is embarrassing. That's another part about it that's a little bizarre. Well, not bizarre, but compared to a car accident, people generally don't feel this embarrassment, but there's like a very human part of a slip and fall that feels like, oh, did I make a mistake? We're going to blame it on ourselves, right? People want to generally accept responsibility. So that's another thing that makes it hard. It's embarrassing. And so after all that, right, no matter what, if you've fallen and if you hurt yourself, whether or not you have a case, the number one priority I tell clients in any case, you need to get better, right? You don't want to live with this forever, so you should go to the doctor. Now, that does help your case too, but that's a second order problem because let's say you leave, you go to the ER, you feel better, you don't want to proceed any further. Sure, there might be a claim there, but it's not going to be substantive and a little harder to fight for. But I've done some small claims where somebody spills something or a company spills something that burns you, and sure, you maybe heals up in a couple weeks. You're still in a decent position to move forward. So the thing that makes it challenging for a lot of places is because the fact that it's going to require them to file litigation, you're going to be in that position that they're going to have to do a complaint and do some work up front and maybe even require an expert. A lot of places, I don't necessarily have this rule, but a lot of bigger firms will have a rule that you need to have some kind of surgery or a fracture. Now, the thing I'll tell you, and like I've probably said in other videos, if you are worried about those things or you don't have those components, I still think it's the best bet to call a couple places, right? You don't know what you don't know, right? If you hurt a disc, right, that's not the same. It's not a break or a surgery, but you might need a surgery. And so that's why you should talk to somebody. I think that this is one of those things too, like people feel, again, there's that embarrassment. Did I fall? Was that the cause? But I have cases where I've looked at where somebody called and I call the store and I say, hey, can we watch the footage? Now, if they won't show you the footage, I feel like sometimes the rule of thumb is like if they won't show you the footage, it's bad. But other times they just don't do it. But later today I have plans to watch a client who fell at a store and I'm assessing the case. And the way to assess the case is to see the footage, right? So if you I've had people call before and they said, I went to the store. What happened? I slipped. Okay, on what? I don't know. When you look behind you, would you see? Nothing. And so I think the thing that's, again, like the embarrassment factor in these that makes them challenging is that if you trip on your feet or you have bad shoes or you have leg issues, right? It's going to be really hard to prove a claim. And frankly, if it comes out that you have a bum leg and have had for years, because your medical records will have to be disclosed to proceed, if that comes out, then your case isn't going to be very good. And so that's like another thing to be aware of, that embarrassment factor, and kind of like it doesn't cover your own mistakes, your own negligence, right? If you drive your car into a wall, a lot of times that's not going to cover your injuries from it. And so you should still have somebody assess it and talk to somebody about it. But if there's nothing and you can't figure it out, that's where you ask an attorney. But this person today, it's possible to review the video footage and there's nothing there. Like, right, they just fell on their feet. But you never know. And so, and they have substantial injuries. So that's why we're looking at it, because I think if that's the case, we'd be in a position to help them. Further, what makes these cases challenging, though, it's going to take time. Like I said, because it doesn't settle pre-suit, insurance companies know this, that cases take longer if they have to get filed. In a case that gets settled pre-suit, it can happen within a year, depending on the situation with a car accident. Not always the case with the slip and fall, but again, that's why often firms will stick to a rule of those kind of damages. I wouldn't put that as a bright line rule, and like I said, I wouldn't rely on that, but that's the thing to be aware of. So it's challenging. So I think rightly the answer of how hard is it to win a slip and fall case, it depends. But I think the thing to know is that you might feel like you don't have a case, and I'll kind of give you some threshold of different ones. I had a person call me once. They fell at the store. They hurt their knee. They went to the doctor twice. Doctor couldn't find anything wrong. And I said, well, what do you want from this? And they said $25,000. And we couldn't move further, because I was like, well, I don't think your $1,000 worth of medical bills, right? I think it's going to be hard to argue your damages, and you have prior knee issues. And so when I say it depends, right, it didn't cost them anything to talk to me about that. It was probably pretty frustrating. I don't know what it's like to be on the other end of that call. But when I'm looking at a case, I want to put their case in the best position. And so they proceeded elsewhere, but you have to have those reasonable expectations. Where I've had people call and they're like, well, I'm fine. I just want to make sure my medical bills get paid and everything gets handled. And I'm looking at it, and this person has a torn shoulder, rotator cuff. They needed surgery. Their back still isn't working. All these things that they maybe aren't thinking of. They just kind of are worried about medical bills that they owe. So it's generally going to go to litigation. I know people who, I'll be frank, I've not settled many before litigation, but I know people who've settled big ones. It really depends on the facts and circumstances. Sometimes the company will realize they did something wrong and they won't want to disclose too much about it, so they want to get that off their books. So is it challenging? Yes. Is it more challenging than a car wreck? Yes. But is it impossible? No. I think, and that's where it's a good area to have somebody on your side who does the work a lot, because, right, I think most of my practice, especially at this point going on my own, is it becomes slip and falls. And I think they're really interesting for me as a lawyer, because, again, you get to advocate for a person, right? You get to stand up for a person. You get to use your knowledge base for them. But also it is so unique. Like each case is very different, even if a slip and fall at this store versus that store. You find out a lot. I think the other thing too that's different, that can be helpful, is that a lot of the times when you see these cases, the reason the person slipped and fell, if you have clear liability, is that the store didn't have any safety procedures, right? If you go to a facility, they have to do what it takes in New Mexico, at least. They have obligations to keep you safe in the store. And so there are sometimes higher burdens of what they need to do that are compared to like car accident cases, what I keep pointing to. All that say, I probably said it once or twice already. If you think you have a slip and fall case, call somebody. I don't think you should hesitate. Most personal injury attorneys don't charge anything, but I think you just need to be aware that you're all in for the long haul. Now, let me go back to one thing. You maybe you got this point, like, well, I don't want to file a lawsuit, right? I don't want to be in court. And I think I've talked about this in other videos too. Just because you file a lawsuit doesn't mean you're going to go to court. It's highly likely you won't, right? Most cases settle, but I don't think that should dissuade you. And you should tell your attorney that, right? If I've had clients who say, I'm more likely to settle earlier because I'm in a position where I don't want to go to court. You might have to do a deposition, but you want to make sure you have an attorney you trust who can coach you through the process. And frankly, if you have to go that route, and make you comfortable if you have to, but also who will respect your wishes and listen to you, right? If you say you want to settle and they won't listen to you, that's not going to be the right relationship for you. So hopefully this video is helpful. Hopefully you're not in the position to need services in this context, but if you are, hopefully you know enough to take pictures, to get information, to get medical care, and at the end of the day, to talk to an attorney to help you out. Hope you have a nice day.